It's Friday. You know what that means? Welcome to planet Earth. We made it to the end of another awesome week. How you guys doing today? Mr. H here hanging out with you because it's Friday. We've got the original OG of flying reptiles, Pteranodon, coming up. A quick USFL update, and we're going to talk about the second greatest football team in history. You know who the first one is, so you little debate on who the second one is. I'll give you a hint. They dominated the 60s. But before we get to all of that, remember, today is June the 23rd. Yesterday was June the 22nd. That's Mrs. H's birthday, but that's not the reason we're talking about the 22nd day of June. We're talking about June 22 because it's the anniversary of Operation Barbarossa. That's right, the biggest part of the biggest war in history. Nazi Germany decides to invade and conquer the Soviet Union. They did a good job on the invade part. Conquer, they came up a little bit short. So on 22 June 1941, as you can see, the full might of the Nazi war machine smashes its way straight into the Soviet Union. For some reason, our friend Adolf, not mine, thought that he could destroy the Soviet Union in 6 weeks. There was some logic behind this belief because, the Red Army Corps had been completely destroyed. They had really no officers, any kind of experience, but they started learning really fast when the Germans came plowing through the western side of Russia. I don't know why Adolf picked June 22nd. You think a guy as historically aware of as he was would pick that day because it's the same day Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812 and lost, so not sure what he was thinking there. And Operation Barbarossa, yeah, he was the Holy Roman Emperor and all that back there in the 11th century. He also drowned trying to bathe in a stream in the middle of Asia Minor during the Third Crusade. Not exactly inspirational. I don't know. And then, of course, when you invade Russia, it's a pretty big task. I mean, first of all, Adolf Hitler, the student of history, should realize Britain has not been defeated yet in the West. Now you open up this whole new front over here in the East. You're caught with that two-front war thing again, the same thing that led to Germany's defeat the first time around. He thought he could win it in 6 weeks. So I guess that's why he took a shot at it and caused a lot of damage. I mean, Army Group North heads for Leningrad. Army Group Center is headed straight for Moscow. Army Group South headed for, they used to call it Kiev back then, Kiev lately. The Russians made the mistake of massing everything up on the border, trying to hit the Germans, everything they had right up on the border, and that was just a recipe for disaster. You see all the arrows flying around here? They punch through the Soviet lines, and they start encircling all these Soviet armies, surround and pound, and crush them over and over and over. Yes, the Soviet Union has a lot of armies and a lot of soldiers, but you can only do this for so long, because if this keeps happening, you start running out of people really quick. And you can see how far they got by September the 1st, man. They're almost to Moscow. But like everything else in the world, the first part's easy, the second part's not. And true to form, Smolensk is the one that causes all the problems to every invader from Western Russia. Napoleon had that problem. The Swedes had that problem in 1709. Now it's Germany's turn to have problems at Smolensk. And the last 2 inches of the map over there, they're not going to make that. What started off so great, nice summertime romp of victory there, everybody their sleeves rolled up, tossing grenades around, having a great time, starts off like this. It's going to end like that. Everybody freezing to death right in front of Moscow. What went wrong? What happened? Well, let's go back and look at this map again. All right, putting you there on the general staff, sitting there in Berlin. What's wrong? What do you see? First thing you notice about Russia, it's big, real big. And this is just a small section of it, right? This is the part you're worried about. It's big, and everything is far away. Look at that. Grodno, which is really part of Poland, going to Minsk. Pretty good jump. Minsk to Smolensk, right? Smolensk to Moscow. There's a long way to go. Another thing you're going to notice, the further east you go, notice how the country starts opening up like a funnel here? Yeah, you're already outnumbered on the attack. The further you go into the country, you start spreading your lines out, you start getting gaps in the line. Don't think the Russians are going to flip, go in between those in between those gaps that causes those problems in the rear. And you got to pull people away to crush those pockets you've left. Those pockets, they're just not surrendering like the French. They actually fight. You got to crush them. So, that's causing problems. And the supply lines, man, they're just getting longer and longer, and they're vulnerable to, those people still sitting in the rear. It's going to slow things down. And let's not forget, you're in Russia. What's the weather like? Yeah, you took off fighting in June, and then by October, the snow starts to fall. They're getting all that. By November, there's snow all over the place. By December, hey, man, welcome to the Ice Age all over again. And what happens in the spring when that snow melts? Yeah, it's going to melt into dirt and become mud. And we're not talking just mud, man. It's a Rasputidia here. I mean, this stuff, your tanks and everything starts sinking in the mud. It's almost as bad as the winter, but at least you're not freezing to death in minus 40-degree temperature. Now, I can't prove this, but there is something about Russia that just rises up to attack invaders. I don't know what it is. I can't prove it. But when the Swedes came through in 1709 and lost at Poltava, they got hit by the worst winter in years. It was so cold, guys from Sweden tried to take a southern route into the Ukraine and try and get away from the cold. Napoleon invades, the worst winter of the 19th century, 1812. All right, and then the Germans attack. We've got weather records. What's the worst winter in the 20th century in Europe? Yeah, you bet, 1941, you guessed it. You're not just fighting Russia. You're not just fighting the Russian people or the Soviet army or the Soviet government. You are fighting Russia. Do you understand? The land itself is trying to kill you. It got so cold in front of Moscow, they had to fire the machine guns every half hour to keep them from freezing up. Oil doesn't freeze, but it gets real thick, especially at minus 40. People have frostbite. You can't stay out very long. Hey, the Russians live here, man. Okay, they're used to this stuff. You're not. This is not looking good, but too late now because you are in it. The Germans come very close to Moscow. Can't quite get there. November the 15th, they launch Operation Typhoon, the final attack on Moscow. And it was the final attack, all right, because they'll never get close again. Got to within 15 miles. Some people claim they could see the Kremlin. Yeah, the only Germans that got the Red Square were prisoners. On December the 5th, they can't do it. They're just too cold. They start dropping back. Hitler's screaming on December the 6th, not one single step back. Yeah, you're not out here, Adolf. On December 7th, you got Pearl Harbor and the whole war changes. So the Germans got in pretty deep, as you can tell, but not enough to win, man. And when they're in front of Moscow freezing to death, boom, what happens? Just when you thought you were close to Moscow, just when you thought maybe you could dig in for the winter and come after them in the spring, what did they get hit with? Oh yeah, all those divisions coming out of Siberia. Over 1 million fresh Siberian soldiers come out of nowhere. Well, come out of the depths of the east, I should say, and smash into the Wehrmacht and starts driving them back. So naturally the question is, where were these guys earlier? They were in Siberia watching the Japanese because they weren't sure if the Japanese were going to attack the Soviet Union from the east at the same time the Germans were attacking from the west. If that had happened, we might have had a completely different outcome to this thing. How did they know the Japanese were not going to attack in the east? Hey, Richard Sorge right here, Mr. Personality, can't you tell? He was a Soviet spy posing as a German journalist who was able to cultivate relationships in the Japanese military and was able to find out that they had no plans of attacking the Soviet Union. Nope, Japan was looking in another direction. Unfortunately, Richard Sorge would get caught and die in prison in 1944. But anyway, the Japanese were looking in another direction. They weren't looking to the north. Where were they looking? Yeah, they were looking way out there to the east and the south. This is why this happened at Pearl Harbor and didn't happen in Vladivostok. Because if they invade Siberia, even if they win, the Russians are going to fight hard. They're going to blow up all the oil wells and everything there. And even if you caught it intact, you can't drill into the spring. Whereas you go down into the South Pacific, hey, you could drill the day you get there. You also hit Pearl Harbor, make sure the Americans don't stop you. Yeah, that didn't work out so great either for the Japanese. Now, when 1942 rolled around, back to this map, and Germans can't seem to take Moscow, Adolf was thinking, that they need the oil. So look down to the south there. See Rostov? He has this thing called Case Blue. He wants to go down into the Caucasus Mountains, right there on the edge of Asia, to seize the oil fields there. And then he commits another major mistake by splitting his forces. One half heads to the Caucasus, Army Group B. Army Group A heads up to Stalingrad. And there was this harebrained scheme of taking Stalingrad, taking the Volga River, and maybe following it up to hit Moscow from behind. That's kind of unconfirmed, but it sounds like the kind of harebrained schemes that were running on Berlin at the time when everything was starting to turn against them. You know, that might actually have been some kind of a conversation somewhere. But we know what's going to happen at Stalingrad, right? Yeah. You already take a look at that city. It's not going to end well. The German army is going to get crushed. The Wehrmacht is not going to be the same afterwards. The Red Army just keeps getting stronger. Plus, they're very upset at being invaded and having most of their country destroyed by the Germans. And it's all going to end up, instead of German armies marching east, it's going to be Soviet armies marching west. And you're going to end up with this, a Soviet flag on top of the Reichstag. And there's a bunker somewhere where Hitler shot himself, or maybe he took off to Argentina, who knows, but I know where he is now in a climate that is much warmer than anything you would ever find in Stalingrad. This was really a savage war, like it came right out of the Middle Ages. I mean, there was genocide. The Germans had thought about eliminating the Slavs and creating, what they call living space, Lebensraum, if I'm saying that correctly. And what did you expect the Russians to do? They're going to hit back. And they drove back with everything they had. The Russians are usually not very good on offensive operations like we've seen in Ukraine, but they're very good at fighting on defense. And when you have that moral imperative, as they certainly did in 1941 to 1945, yeah, suddenly you get a lot better on offense. So it was a pretty vicious, nasty war, but at the end of the day, hey, they won. We won, the Brits won, that's why we're here. Now, long before anyone even thought of a Second World War or a First World War, soaring in the skies was Pteranodon. This is what I call the OG of the flying reptiles. There's tons of pterosaurs, as they call them, pterosaurs, but Pteranodon is the one that grabs everybody's imagination. They used to think it was the biggest one, but it's not. They found others that are bigger, but it's still pretty good size here. 20-foot wingspan. Some people claim 40. That's unsubstantiated. Maybe it's that iconic crest on the head along with the beak. This is when you think of flying reptiles, this is the first one that comes to mind. And yes, Pteranodon is much bigger than pterodactyl. Pterodactyls are small, pteranodons are big. I remember this because I had a screaming, shouting debate about this in the 5th grade. And yes, I won. As you can see, we're talking about the size of Pteranodon here. We're looking just a tick over 6 meters, about 18 feet. So, 20-foot wingspan is not, unheard of. Like I said, some people claim 40 feet, but it's a fragmentary fossil. Not even sure if it's actually Pteranodon. Could be some kind of relative. Who knows? Go back in time, take a picture. Let me know how it turns out. Now, a lot of people debate what a pteranodon might have actually looked like. Again, it's been 70 million years, so it's not that easy. You've got the classic one there with the bat wings and kind of brownish looking color. Other people have speculated, because all you really can do with an animal that's been extinct 70 million years, that it was much brighter colored because it lived near the ocean. And there's some evidence to back this up. Pteranodon would probably live somewhere on the cliffs. There's a lot of cliffs on the ocean. Also good food supply there, fish. Be careful mosasaur doesn't jump out of depths and grab you while you're skimming the surface. And a lot of thermal updrafts to help you fly. So it's not unheard of. It's not an insane hypothesis. I've heard of even worse, and I got a few coming up. Have you ever seen some of these old school dinosaur movies from like the 40s, 50s, and maybe even the 70s? Where a pteranodon or something that looks like a pteranodon tries to pick up a human being and take off with it. Could a pteranodon actually pick a human being up? We saw that too in Jurassic World, and I don't think it could. Pteranodon is, as you can tell, somewhat a slightly built kind of animal. Might have some size to it, as you can tell, but it doesn't look like it weighs a lot. The estimates are maybe 110 pounds, and I don't think you could pick that guy up. Eagles could pick up 3 times their weight. So if you're looking at 110 pounds, called 100 even, pick up about 300 pounds. Yeah, theoretically can pick up a human being, but remember something. There's a difference between picking up 300 pounds of static weight and 300 or 200 pounds of screaming, shouting, terrified human who's going to beat on your legs and feet and everything and try to shake loose. So I don't think pteranodon goes after big things. Like I said, mainly fish or small animals, kind of like an eagle. It might go after something big now and again. If you go back in time and build yourself a house in the Cretaceous period, I don't think you have to worry about pteranodon swooping down and grabbing you, but keep all small pets indoors and make sure you know where the kids are, because there's a lot of bad things going on in the Cretaceous and they're all very hungry. Now, some people have speculated that perhaps pterosaurs survived the KT extinction. I've seen no evidence indicating they have. I've yet to see any fossils that are younger than 70 million years old, but people claim to see them flying about in different places in North America. I guess in the Rockies usually. I've heard about the Appalachians. Makes sense, right? It's on a cliff in the mountains somewhere. Well, this gentleman, Jonathan David Whitcomb, I'll give him a free plug, wrote his own book, and notice he wrote nonfiction over there. So, I don't know. If you want to take a look at that, go right ahead and tell me what you think of it down there in the comments. I haven't seen any live pterosaurs. If I do see any, I'm not going to tell anyone because, well, they already know I'm crazy. But, yeah, leave the pterosaurs alone. They got their own stuff going on. Human beings mess with animals way too much as it is. Can't figure out why people like to play with buffalo at Yosemite. They don't like that. Now, other people have wondered about North American legends called the Thunderbird. What is the Thunderbird? I guess it could just be a big bird, no one knows, but you see the same thing I see, don't you? Right there on top of its head? Yeah, I see the crest as well. Some people are thinking that maybe pteranodon pterosaurs, survived into modern times somehow. And I'm sure somebody's going to point out to me about Herodotus talking about winged serpents in Arabia, but he never actually went there, so I'm not sure how much stock we could put in this. But somebody saw something that inspired him to make this picture of a thunderbird. Maybe it was a big bird, maybe it was a pterosaur, maybe somebody with a very overactive imagination. Yes, everyone's got them. Now, there we are. Here is definitive proof that pterosaurs live in modern time in North America. See, the verified genuine image of a modern pterosaur. I mean, I'm convinced it's on the internet. It's got to be true, right? Yeah, I don't really think that any Union soldiers brought down a pterosaur with muskets. It just doesn't seem very possible. Maybe the Confederacy was using them as some kind of a secret weapon. I'm pretty sure we'd have known something about it, you know. So I'm going to put that down in the hoax category. If you could prove otherwise, please do. I don't mind. But please have some solid evidence and just don't go around shouting like you're some Steeler game somewhere. How about Tombstone? No, not that Tombstone. The other Tombstone. Yeah, the Tombstone pterosaur. So everybody thinks this picture could be real. I don't think it is. First of all, Shootout at the OK Corral, 1881, right? This picture was taken allegedly somewhere around 1890, so I guess they need another tourist attraction. People forget about the Shootout at the OK Corral fairly quickly. Do you know they actually poured sand and sawdust over the blood 30 minutes after the shootout and played a baseball game? Yeah, I'm not sure who was playing, what the score was. I'm pretty sure it wasn't the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Toronto Blue Jays or anything. But this picture, yeah, I think it's fake unless somebody can prove otherwise. So if this were real, believe me, they would have kept that skull or something to keep it as a tourist attraction. And that dog over there, that just looks way too calm. In fact, it could be fake and inserted. It's the internet after all. Hey, quick look at the USFL. I don't know how this happened, but the Pittsburgh Maulers went 4-6 and won their division. No idea how this happened. They were 2-6 going nowhere, won 2 games. They win the North Division. They got 4-6 Michigan coming to visit. They're going to play on Saturday at the Hall of Fame Stadium in Canton, Ohio. Following day, Sunday, The 7-3 Breakers came in second in the South, going up against number 1 Birmingham at 8-2, and then those two guys they'll play again for the championship a week later. But hey, that's the USFL. It's 21st century. How would these teams fare against somebody from, say, the 60s? Probably not. The Green Bay Packers dominated the 1960s, the first actual team of some decade. Team of the 60s, the Steelers, team of the 70s, the Niners, team of the 80s. A lot of the stuff was media manufactured stuff. But hey, you got to admit, Green Bay did a really good job back then. A little bit before my time, but hey, I know how to read in about 4 different languages. So I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing here. Here's the architect of that fantastic team back there in the 60s. This is Vince Lombardi. He's from New York. There he is playing in a Yankee Stadium. This guy put a team together. Well, actually, he kind of ran what he found. Because if you look at the roster of the 1959 Packers, went 1-10-1. Yeah, it's the same team all the way up to 1967 when he left. So he kind of took what he found and built around that. And he did a really good job. But as great as he is, as legendary as it is, overnight success is not overnight. As a matter of fact, they lost the very first championship game they ever went to. Yep, 1960, they go up against the Philadelphia Eagles and they lose 17-13. Also notice no G on the helmet, right? That's the only thing missing from this team. So that's the only championship game Lombardi ever loses is his first one. Better than the last one, right? So 1960, they come in second. In 61, they're back. They slap that G on the helmet. They're playing at home, and they literally clobber the New York Giants 37-0. See, number 14, that's Y.A. Tittle getting hit in the head. You can't do that now. It's a penalty. My favorite part is pictures the guy there on the ground, number 53. He missed that block. He missed a block, and he sees his quarterback just get smashed. Yeah, he's about to become a fossil. So they lose the first one in 60. They win the next one in 1961. Hey, what's the next thing to do? Let's go to 1962. Again against the Giants, this time in New York. Hey, different uniforms, different stadium, same result. The Green Bay Packers win 16-7. They kind of have a flat line there for a while afterwards. 63 and 64, they didn't get to the championship. And you think back to back, you deserve a rest. No, you don't deserve a break. Not at this level, man. You try to win every year or you don't show up. So in 1965, they showed up against Cleveland in the Mud Bowl. Yeah, see that? The Mud Bowl, playing at Lambeau Field. None of this namby-pamby dome stuff here. Okay, we're playing outdoors in the weather. Right? This is man's football right here. We used to do the same thing as kids, us, because, we're playing in somebody's backyard. But nonetheless, the Packers, hey, they get another championship in 1965. So you know what that means. Vince Lombardi's not going to be satisfied with that. Off we go to 1966. That, by the way, is Jim Brown, one of the best running backs of all time, Cleveland Browns. That was his last game, actually. So here we are in 1966 playing down in Dallas against the Dallas Cowboys. This was an epic game. I actually saw it on YouTube, so I love about the 21st century. I can actually watch these games from the 60s, pretend I was actually there. And this game came down to the wire, and the Packers are going to win 34-27. So they've got themselves a second straight NFL championship. But you know how the old saying goes, even when it's over, it's not over, because this is 1966. The NFL championship is not the last game of the year. You've got one more. Super Bowl I. There we are, LA Coliseum, playing against the Kansas City Chiefs in the American Football League. I love this picture because you see the empty seats back there. Yeah, you know why it's empty? Because it's the first Super Bowl. Nobody really knew what it was. So even the Packers weren't even sure. They say, we won the championship. It's not over yet. What? Super Bowl? What? So anyway, they went there and they won 35-10. So there we are. 2 straight NFL championships. You got the first Super Bowl. Vince Lombardi, he doesn't rest, man. We're looking for a 3rd straight. Anybody ever win 3 straight NFL championships? That answer is yes. Here we are. The Cowboys are back, this time playing on the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. And it was frozen, man, minus 15 degrees. Oh, those guys in Dallas didn't like that. Came down to a quarterback sneak touchdown with 16 seconds left. Bart Starr goes over the top, and the Cowboys lose 21-17. I have friends of mine who are Cowboy fans. Again, nobody I know was even around for this game, but everybody watching on YouTube, and my Cowboy friends will vehemently claim that the Packers were offsides. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I didn't see a penalty. So 21-17. It was in 1967. Let it go, says the guy who still holds a grudge over the Fourth Crusade. So after they win their third straight NFL championship, hey, it's off to Miami for their second straight Super Bowl, where they clobber the then Oakland Raiders. So, pretty good record there. After that, Lombardi decided to retire. He came back briefly with the Redskins. And three straight NFL championships, two straight Super Bowls. If they had started the Super Bowl a year early, I'm pretty sure they would have won three straight Super Bowls. They've been playing against the Buffalo Bills in the AFL. I ran a computer simulation. It says the Packers win 37-24. I don't know how accurate that is. But hey, even though they are not the Steelers, it's still a pretty good record. I mean, I'm impressed. Can you imagine that? Five five championships, 7 years, two Super Bowls. Oh man, if they're not the greatest team, they're a very close second. We're going to go a very close second because I'm going to pick for number one, right? That's right. Next week it's the 70s Steelers. Hey guys, have yourself a great weekend. I will see you there. Have fun. Enjoy yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Das vidanya.